By 1941, the Axis war machine had plunged Europe into darkness. From the French Atlantic coast to the Russian steppes, the continent appeared to be a locked, impenetrable fortress. In the icy expanse of the mid-Atlantic, an area known as the Black Gap, German U-boats hunted in relentless wolf packs. They were silently picking off British merchant ships, choking off the island's vital lifelines of food and oil. The devastation extended to the air. Relentless aerial bombardment during the Blitz left vast stretches of London reduced to shattered shells and rubble. Meanwhile, on the Eastern Front, the sheer weight of the German panzer divisions was systematically chewing the vast Soviet armies to pieces. Brute force was failing. The Allies were losing the war of attrition, and to survive, they required an entirely new kind of knockout blow. The geography dictated the struggle. Britain was an isolated island, dependent on fragile sea routes, while Germany held a unified landmass with absolutely no Allied troops on the continent. Both sides initially looked for a decisive physical breakthrough. They built bigger guns, heavier tanks, and drafted millions of men, creating an immense, bloody stalemate massing on the borders. To crack the Third Reich, the Allies realized they couldn't simply bash their way through the front door. They had to fight an unseen war, weaponizing intelligence, deception, and the electromagnetic spectrum. In the Atlantic, German U-boat commanders were enjoying what they called the happy time, sinking so much Allied shipping that Britain was on the verge of total starvation. The turning point arrived in May 1941. The British destroyer HMS Bulldog captured a crippled U-boat, and inside they found this device, the Enigma machine, complete with its highly secretive naval codeboats. Armed with this invisible intelligence, the Allies began reading German naval communications. They actively routed their vulnerable supply convoys entirely away from the waiting wolf packs, cutting shipping losses by more than half. High above the continent, a different invisible war was raging. British bombers attacking Germany were suffering devastating 10% loss rates, picked off by highly accurate German anti-aircraft radar. The British countered with a brilliantly simple technological trick codenamed Window. By dropping clouds of aluminum foil strips from their planes, they created a massive electromagnetic fog that completely jammed the German radar screens. Blinded on the ground, German air defenses were suddenly helpless. The result was felt in July 1943 during Operation Gomorrah, when unhindered Allied bombers ignited a giant, unstoppable firestorm across the city of Hamburg. Mastering the unseen frequencies, reading the enemy's codes, and blinding their sensors became the prerequisite for both physical survival and a sustained offensive. By 1944, Hitler had constructed the Atlantic Wall. Thousands of miles of concrete bunkers, artillery emplacements, and mines formed an impenetrable barrier that made a direct amphibious assault look like suicide. The Allied solution for D-Day was Operation Bodyguard, an elaborate, massive deception campaign designed to hide exactly where the invasion would strike. The Allies invented an entirely fictitious fighting force, the 1st U.S. Army Group, supposedly stationed in Kent and commanded by their most aggressive officer, General George Patton. To sell this lie to German reconnaissance planes, the British filled the fields of Kent with wooden airplanes, broadcast fake radio traffic, and parked entire battalions of inflatable tanks. This illusion targeted a specific psychological blind spot. The German High Command logically assumed the attack had to come at the Pas de Calais, the narrowest point of the English Channel. When the Allied troops stormed the beaches of Normandy, they succeeded because the Germans had been tricked into holding their crucial panzer reserves hundreds of miles away, waiting for a phantom army that never existed. On the Eastern Front, the scale of Allied production began to show. Soviet factories deep in Siberia were churning out 2,000 rugged T-34 tanks every single month. As this mechanized torrent pushed west, Hitler issued fanatical no-retreat orders. The German High Command locked its armies in place, allowing hundreds of thousands of their own soldiers to be encircled and destroyed. But the Soviet leader, Joseph Stalin, was operating with his own calculations. As the Red Army advanced, military combat became secondary to his political ambitions. In the summer of 1944, the Polish Home Army rose up against their Nazi occupiers in Warsaw. Stalin deliberately halted the Red Army just outside the city, allowing the Germans to brutally slaughter the Polish fighters. Stalin used the guise of liberation to eliminate ideological rivals who were loyal to the Western Allies. He was fighting a parallel, unseen war, clearing the geopolitical board to build the foundation for his own future empire. By late 1944, the Axis lines crumbled simultaneously. Allied forces broke out of Normandy and raced across France, while the Red Army swept through the Balkans. Allied numerical superiority was only one side of the coin. The German command's inability to deviate from Hitler's fixed orders left them defenseless against the Allies' ability to improvise and deceive. Hitler's hubris blinded him to the invisible battlefields of intelligence and logistics, engineering the total destruction of his own empire. The infrastructure of this unseen war, the code-breaking, the mass surveillance, and the tactical lies used to paralyze entire armies, was not retired when the guns fell silent. These methods moved from the battlefield into the halls of government. The hot war had ended, but it left behind the mechanisms of a silent struggle that would define the next 40 years. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to Ancient World Unveiled to discover more of history's forgotten truths.